January 2000, the height of the internet boom. I'm sitting in the office of the CEO of a Silicon Valley startup. I'm admiring the clear blue sky through his window. There is not a cloud on the horizon. And I can't help but think, this weather is a metaphor. Forget revenue or business models. In those days, investors were throwing money at guys like this, guys who had an idea, not much more, guys who were chasing the dream of the big win. Everybody wants to be a winner, after all. Who wants to be a loser? Certainly not this CEO, whose name was Mark. Until then, Mark's career had been a series of successes, not least of which was the earlier sale of a startup to Microsoft. But that wasn't for huge money, and this time, he was smelling the big one. Together with his co-founder, they had pooled together several million from various investors, and they were using that money to build the website that they were going to ride into the sunset. Now, I'd met Mark at a party a few months before. Great guy, very personable. We hit it off right away, and he'd invited me to come in to consult for him, which is why I was sitting in his office that morning. But suddenly, I'm listening to an unexpected proposition. He's telling me, forget consulting, come join us. And I would do that because if we are not a billion-dollar company by the end of this year, we will have failed. $1 billion in less than 12 months, or failure. That's the way people thought back then. Although, I shouldn't suggest that they don't think that way now. What with the Groupons and the LinkedIns and Mark Zuckerberg headed to a $28 billion personal fortune a few years after he had the idea for a website, things haven't changed that much. Although, to be fair, the guys with money still, or today, tend to ask to see a business plan first. But isn't it interesting how these successes capture our imaginations? We hear about them all the time. The quick wins, the big hits, the kids who make it their first time out. Our popular culture is filled with their stories, making myths of them and turning them into heroes and role models. And yet, how many of those successes have followed one to many failures? How many have been defined by the failures that came before them? We point to examples from history of the mistakes and failures of great men on their way to great inventions. But when it comes to applying failure to our time, we'd rather focus on the winners. Consider the iconic Apple TV ad from a few years ago. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. It's not by accident that this carefully crafted, classically American can-do-anything message omits one critical phrase. Here's to the ones who fail. Steve Jobs had his share. But in business, we don't like failure. We'd rather sweep it under the rug. It smells bad. After all, when's the last time you saw anybody stand up in a business meeting to announce that failure is an option? Yet when we're teaching our children to take on new challenges, we emphasize that they have to fall hundreds of times before they can walk. Why is it any different in business? In these times of profound transformation all around us, thousands of ideas and businesses fall under the wheels of the train every day, making way for the very few successes that follow. In our everyday lives, success comes from observing, learning from, and overcoming failure, our own as well as others. So why, in business, do we insist on being ashamed of our failures? We should be as proud of the lessons they teach us as we are of our successes. Many of our most elevating and beloved films are about people who fail. George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life never gets to travel. Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird loses the big case. Hollywood producer Lindsay Duran puts it like this: Obi-Wan dies, Dumbledore dies, Gandalf dies. 1,500 passengers in the Titanic die. Thousands of Pandorans die. The protagonist may be happy in the end, but his smile is laced with the loss that's come before. The accomplishment the audience values the most is resilience. So let's do Apple a favor and fill that gap in their ad, shall we? Here's to the ideas that didn't work, to the products that found no market, to the millions lost on unworkable or poorly executed projects, to the times you've lost your job or your business. As for my Silicon Valley CEO and his startup, I was seduced. I joined the company. In those first months, we went from 25 to 135 staffers, gathering every Friday afternoon in the lunchroom over sushi and pizza, literally to applaud and cheer the week's achievements. I remember one afternoon that summer, Mark walked into my office to announce that they had just closed another financing round. $40 million, he kept repeating. He'd just hit the lottery. 5 months later, I and 115 others were laid off. The internet bubble had burst, the ride was over, and along with it, the CEO's billion-dollar 12-month dream. They had failed. But that's not quite the end of the story. The VCs told them to sit on the money. Figure it out, they said. We can wait. It took a little while, but the founders shifted gears, transformed the company from a website into an online service provider. Mark got bumped from CEO to senior vice president for sales, making cold calls and sweet-talking secretaries. 13 years later, in 2012, they're still around, building a business brick by brick out of the rubble that began as a billion-dollar dream. Failure has been morphed into something else, something built to last. The idea? Success almost always and inevitably takes a very long time, and more often than not, comes on the back of multiple failures. Thank you.